Now I'm going to go into the 10 best practices when it comes to communicating security. And the first one I like to start with, and it's the most important, is to always focus on business impact, right? If the business does not want to pay for the nicest newest security tool, that's okay, right? It's the business's decision how to handle this risk. But when we communicate business impact, it makes it personal, right? We're tailoring our message. We're not saying, you know, let's say banks in general, banks are having a higher rate of ransomware, or threat actors are going after healthcare this month. That's very general, and where it has a place in our communication, really it's specific business impact, right? So, it's more valuable for us, as vCISOs to say, here's the systems we have in place. These are the systems that are supporting patients, or these are systems that are supporting financial transactions. And, you know, we know that that's critical to the business. And we see this happening in the industry, and these are our peers that are using the same software, right? So, they had a breach. So we've communicated with their team, right? And here's where the threat actor got in. And so, as you start tailoring it specific to the business and the business impact, it becomes more effective. So, as we're communicating this risk, the big thing we don't want to do is use acronyms, don't use technical jargon. Do kind of make that message something that, non-security people understand, right? So that all goes into, being able to communicate that risk and that business impact in a way that every stakeholder understands. So they understand how it affects the business as a whole, how it affects their division or their line of business that they're managing. And ultimately, it allows them to be on the same page. And the ultimate goal is for the stakeholders to agree, right? And agree on, that this is a risk and it's something that needs to be addressed. So the next one is ensuring a common vocabulary, right? I think that as we look at different language styles, different backgrounds, different you know, kind of different historical, perspectives, as we look at a common vocabulary, if I walk in and as a CISO and I say, hey, this is critical. Well, what does critical mean to me? What does critical mean to the person I'm communicating with? And so, to be effective as a vCISO, you've got to set this, common vocabulary, right? So rather than just saying something is critical, say, we've defined critical risk as, if this happens, it could cost the business between $1 and $10 million, right? And, being more defined in what are we saying is critical, because, each stakeholder, when you ask them what's critical to them, is going to have a different answer. And so being able to streamline and having a common vocabulary, if I say an endpoint, well, to some people, an endpoint might be just a computer. But to others, an endpoint can be computers, servers, branches within the business. So, establishing that common vocabulary amongst the stakeholders, so that as you're communicating, everyone knows what you're talking about, and there's no gray area for misinterpretation. The next one is using analogies, right? A lot of people may not understand exactly what you're saying, but if you can illustrate the point you're trying to make with an analogy, this is key in understanding, that maybe being able to communicate a topic that they don't understand the topic, but they might understand the analogy better, and then relating that back to the concept. And I like the idea of data hoarding, and we have it here, and it's now that storage has become cheap, a lot of companies will store they don't have to delete anything. They'll have records for decades, and but being able to go in and communicate that, if a threat actor gets into the network, right, their goal is to get as much valuable data as they can. And so, if you've got, let's say pen test records from 5 years ago, but you haven't done anything about it, well, that just became the blueprint for that threat actor to move around your network. And so being able to illustrate the data, and all of this data sitting in systems as a hoarder's home, right? That, you've got all of these things piled floor to ceiling, and you may know where it is, you may not know where it is, but someone that's coming in, a threat actor that's coming in, that has all the time in the world, to be able to sift through things, to pick up piles and look through them and find what might be valuable and walk out. You never know they were there because there's so much that you're sifting through. It's an analogy that someone can visualize. And so being able to, communicate in analogies might help communicate real complex, security problems in a way that anybody that you're communicating with can understand. The next thing is being concise, right? Executives, their time's valuable. And, early in my career, I got advice that, if you want an executive to read something, put it in the first two sentences. But I find that what winds up happening with the executive team is they're getting pulled 100 different ways, making different decisions all throughout the day, and so you have to be concise, especially when dealing with the C-suite or board. Is you want to communicate in that first little bit the key pieces that's needed, and then if it's an email or a document, put further detail down below, because if it sparks their interest to want to know more, they'll continue reading. But the big thing is being concise there at the beginning, and then detailing any questions or objections that might come up further down. One thing that helps is visual aids, charts and graphs showing trends, being able to, tailor and create the charts that pinpoint exactly what you're trying to communicate. It might be, here's our vulnerabilities versus our peers, like an industry average, to show, let's say we might have a problem with unpatched systems. But when you visually show something like a chart or things like that, it will communicate to a different style of learner, right? So, we look at how people learn and consume data. Some want detailed paragraphs and narratives. Some may just want a chart. They may look at a chart and be able to see exactly what the chart's trying to communicate that they wouldn't pull out in a paragraph narrative. So being able to, as you're communicating, include both, right? Because there's going to be different people reading, and they're going to pick up on different things. So being able, the next thing is communicating regularly, right? As a vCISO, we're in a service role, right? A lot of us are with MSPs or MSSPs, and the goal is to communicate regularly. We don't want to talk to a client once a month because they're going to forget what we talked about the month before. there's a cadence, and being able to figure that out with the stakeholders is key to a good vCISO practice. And so communicating regularly, right? We want to communicate security posture. We want to communicate, incidents and improvements that we've made. But ultimately, our goal is to keep security, front of mind, so that you're essentially affecting the culture of the client to where security is not that afterthought. Security is not, secondary to business operations. It becomes ingrained that, you know, what does security think? Or, let me ask security. And, so you want to communicate at a regular enough cadence that the business will think about security, as they're doing their day-to-day work. So you want to engage with the stakeholders, right? So each of these stakeholders that we talked about previously, the CEO, the CFO, COO, different businesses are going to have different stakeholders. But ultimately, you want to engage with those stakeholders. So you want to be able to communicate and say, how can I help you? Right? How can I help your division? What are the risks that you see? What is causing problems? What are you hearing from your peers? A lot of the different areas, as a cyber professional, I'll go to cyber conferences, but I won't go to an HR conference. And so, each stakeholder is going to have their circle of influence, their areas that they're going to network. And so, keeping that engagement with these stakeholders lets you ask them, what are you seeing? What are you hearing in the HR community, or in the finance community? What are others, what are concerns that you're hearing about that you might have? And being able to engage with them and make it more personal to their area of business. Um, One of the exercises we'll get into later, but really it's, mapping who are the stakeholders and what is the frequency, what's the best way to communicate with them, looking at the narratives versus the charts and understanding. So, as you communicate with stakeholders, you can start picking up, these are the things that, if I said it this way, maybe there was that aha moment that, okay, that's the communication style that the stakeholder understands. So the only way that you can get to the point of getting that buy-in and getting that getting that effectiveness within the security program is to engage with the stakeholders, and doing that regularly and figuring out, this is what they like to see, this is what they don't like to see. If I do it this way, they ask more questions. So in that area, it's a kind of that constant relationship with these stakeholders. The next thing is to prepare for questions, right? You've got to anticipate that if you're communicating risk, there's going to be questions, right? There's going to be, you know, the biggest question I always hear when I talk to boards and executives is just the simple, are we secure? Right. And, as a security professional, it's like, well, there's always room for improvement, but, there's going to be questions. There's going to be follow on. There's going to be, how did you come to that figure? What does it mean for us? And so, when communicating with these different teams, you need to understand what they're going to ask, right? And be ready for that. A CFO is going to say, how much is this going to cost us? Or, how much is it going to cost if we don't do it? So being prepared for that shows that you're the expert in the field, right? It's not let me get back to you. If every time someone asks a question, it's let me get back to you, then they're going to start wondering, how, how effective are you being if you can never give them an answer? And so, communicating definitely comes with understanding what's going to be asked and, being prepared for an answer. And if it is something that you truly have to go back for, don't feel bad. It's, I've done that. If I present a topic and someone has a question about a chart or graph, and I'm like, let me go ask my team. They prepared this section of the report. Let me go ask clarification how they got that. So that's okay, but ultimately, it's being prepared to communicate in different ways and being prepared for those questions. And, maybe if there's a topic that they didn't understand, using that analogy that we talked about before, just being able to, tailor your communications to the audience.